Well, here we are in the starting position of this next turn. I've done the population expansion, the taxes already. Obviously, poor Egypt didn't get any taxes without any cities. What we're seeing here, I'm much more used to the expansion trade cards. I played just a couple of times since I kind of gave up on them. And it's a much more volatile game. And the disasters come out more often. They're more devastating. It's not just Egypt who's hosed, but you can see Assyria, Babylon, they're all weakened, even though they're doing well. There's usually just not enough disaster, calamity effect to spread around to really wreck everyone the way this game feels like it's doing. I like that about the game. The only issue is you can calculate where your disaster, it's easier to figure out, am I going to get that disaster? It's easier to avoid it, I think, in this version. It's easier to let somebody else take the brunt of it. But it usually can be dished out to you as well, so that's okay. Plus, the hidden ones, once you go through them once, it's harder to tell where they're going to be. It's easier to forget how many cards were put on top, how many have slipped under since, I don't know. Very easy to lose track of those things. I tend to not to pay too much attention to them, but somebody who does could really dominate the game by knowing always who has the calamity, who doesn't, stuff like that. I often know, but it's not... if I know, most people probably do. Alright, let's get on with the actual... Well, we gotta build ships. I haven't done that yet. Okay, there weren't a lot of boats used. Thrace built one down here to ship themselves to this island and set themselves up. They'll be able to build a city on that island soon. And building a 12th city is just... It's so expensive that it's almost impossible. So the city sites do become important. Thrace also kind of gave up its attacks on Italy, at least on the boot, but overall as well. They become much less violent. Because Italy's building the last of their city spaces. That means there's no real easy, cheap way to grow in Italy. It becomes less important, and now they're considering expanding into Asia Minor, where there seems to be some chaos and a room for opportunity. Now, Crete also used a boat. 1, 2, dropped somebody off here so they could build a city, and then 3, 4, finding a little place to land. Now, they could have landed over here, but they were going early enough in the turn. You can see they're under Thrace there, that they didn't want to be in an exposed location. The main thing they want is access to the sea so that they can maybe shift over to North Africa soon. But this turn it was more important to get that city built. They had to do something about it, and they only built one boat. Now, we do have some conflict, mainly in the east. There's an interesting factor here. It doesn't play a lot of influence, but every one of the Eastern powers has metalworking. Assyria, Babylon, Egypt. That means that no matter how many pieces there are in a stack, in a conflict area, the people without metalworking were moved first. So let's take a quick look at one such, and there aren't many. For whatever reason, Assyria and Babylon kind of withdrew from where the Cretans put a push on them. Crete actually was able to expand in a way I didn't think they would. I thought they'd be stopped by it. But there's a homogeneity that you achieve by bringing your guys in, and Babylon's the one paying the price for Assyria's attempt to make sure that all their stuff is kind of conglomerated in a location where they can bring their strength to bear all at once. Okay, but here we have a battle, and normally Italy has 2, Egypt has 1, Egypt would just die. But instead, because of metalworking, Italy loses 1, and now we're good, and we're at the population limit. Alright, well, I'll finish the rest of the combats, build some cities, and there aren't a lot of combats. make sure I can build all the cities I did. Babylon's losing a significant number of people. And then go on to the trade stuff. While I'm slapping these cities down, I wanted to talk about Egypt a little bit. They built a city here which Africa could have interfered with. If Africa threw 2 people in, they would have caused Egypt to fail. Of course, that would hurt Africa, losing 2 people for no good. And they don't really gain anything. This city space isn't really a rare commodity right now. North Africa is filled with city spaces and low on population. And then finally, Egypt's not doing terribly well, so it's not like you want to hit them harder. Just one of those, you know, you have this possibility to do damage, but you usually don't want to. Even though it costs the other person more than it costs you. Well, I used the census chart, I think I've pointed this out before, to keep track of the number of cities at this point, because it's only important during movement otherwise. And that's what we got, and it highlights kind of this rise and fall of the civilizations, which again you don't see with the expanded trade cards because the calamities don't come out enough. There isn't enough disruption, so usually people are kind of floating at a certain level throughout the game. Sometimes somebody falls, but it's usually not as dramatic as what can happen here. I mean, here not only did Egypt just plummet, but we see even the powers that were doing very well pretty low on the list. 4 and 3 cities for Babylon and Assyria. Assyria was up at, what, 8? They have a gems in their hand. For right now there's only one person with a 7 in their hand, which is Italy, who just drew up. I like that kind of pattern. I like where you can't be sure what you're going to get because the calamities have such a big effect on things and you don't know who's going to deal them. And they just keep coming out every turn. Speaking of those calamities, this turn, Babylon picked up an earthquake, which isn't too bad. You know, a city's reduced, but so what. And Africa got a civil war. Now, their civil war is probably not going to affect them. 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, yeah, it is. So they're going to lose probably a city here, just because they can't afford to lose the manpower. 5 points of manpower. And we'll see how that goes. But first we got to do the trading, and I've got to go to work while I wait. So there's going to be kind of a break. I marked it here. Alright, major purchases. Let's see. Crete made a huge jump here. They bought 3 things. They actually, like Assyria last turn, probably could have made their barrier, but they're ahead of space. They also had seen already that 2, 4, 6, Assyria didn't make it. Babylon didn't make it. So there's no real hurry for them to move ahead at this point. And there's some risk. They have a decent number of low price ones here. I know if you buy all the low ones, you don't make your 1,000 points. I don't think they're in terrible danger, but they may be put in a position where to fill out their 11, they absolutely have to get the top 3, the 3 top civics, and that's kind of a painful position to be in. What else? Africa picked up drama and poetry. They're kind of out of cards now. That's they're fine though, other than, I mean, they've got a long way to travel before they have to meet their next limit, so they're okay. Italy made its limit by picking up, no, they already had it. They decided to hold their things. Thrace made their limit though. They picked up a pile of things: metalworking, cloth making, and architecture. No bonus for getting both of these at once, but they wanted the metalworking, and there really weren't other options available to them. This was the only way they could make their 3 colors and spend their income well. So, you know, they lose 10 bucks off of it, but that's okay. They couldn't get, for example, another, the music, which would have been more valuable to them. And these guys pretty much stuck. You know, Babylon has a decent hand, but not enough to get them over the barrier. And the same situation here with Assyria. They're holding this gems, which maybe it'll become valuable, but otherwise they just have some iron. And obviously Egypt didn't get anywhere. We've got a couple calamities to do: civil war and the volcano and earthquake. Alright, the effect of the civil war was Egypt got this city over here. Africa couldn't hold all their cities. They needed to take their manpower to keep their cities alive. Can Egypt hold them all? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. They only have 3, so they're okay. Yeah, they're great. And Babylon took this one, which is, you know, recuperates lots of people in their backfields, so that's great. They still can't go here. They're going to have to build their city in one of these. Going forward, who does? Well, Africa, Italy, Thrace made their color scheme. Crete did not make 7 cards. They hold back. Assyria, Babylon both hold back. Egypt gets to go back forward because they're still in place. Well, this is absolutely pathetic. I did it again. Screwed up. Italy is losing 3 cities because they didn't have enough stock in mind. And, you know, normally I used to be very used to making that calculation. I can't afford not to spend my treasury. Well, it's just happening again and again. And these are going to go to Assyria at this point. And I mean, you know, you're not seeing a reasonable game here at all if this kind of stuff's happening. I see this in all my years of play. You know, maybe a newbie would let it happen a couple of times in a couple of different games, not a couple of times per newbie. But it's really an easy thing to keep track of, but I'm so unused to the game that I'm just doing it again and again. And I don't know what to do. Oh well, I suffer. And no, we got all kind of Assyrian cities sitting here in the middle of there, and whatever. One thing I can say in my defense is when I used to play it, I used to play pretty much solid, you know, I mean, and I can't do that now. And I've gotten very much in the habit of playing things. Oh, I'll play a turn here and then wander away. So it's very easy to make mistakes. I probably make them all the time in an 18xx game, whatever. Just the nature of my play. I can no longer devote myself to focusing completely on a game anymore. Such as. Well, now we're going to see how the combat system works with the power of metalworking, because the Assyrians have pushed in to where they're going to hit a lot of Cretan units. They've also thrown themselves in here where they're destroying a Babylonian city being built. Babylon kind of took a chance. Assyria was just a hair's breadth away from being able to build a city, even with these additional cities they got off Italy. But they couldn't quite do it. They had to preserve every single piece, so they're doing a little bit of violence in addition to that, trying to dominate this area. But we're also seeing the Egyptians building a big city here. They have to put 8 people into it. It's the only way they could grow, though. But they're also conducting some attacks, one-on-one type attacks, that the metalworking gives them the edge on. Wow. Yeah. We got a Thracian city going up here. We got Cretans landing over here in northwestern Africa. Well, we'll see. I don't know if Crete's going to be able to successfully build this city. I know that they could build 2, but they had to pretty much preserve everything. So they didn't think that was very likely with how early in the turn they were going to be going. All right, well, I'll take care of that. All right, Crete's going to open up the trading. You can see where we've ended up. Poor Italy down on the 4-card slot because of their screw-up. Now, that screw-up's actually kind of an interesting one, because sometimes you do want to keep a pile of cash along with cards because, well, you want to trade in next turn. This was inexcusable, though. You should never be in that position. I mean, unless you could not have bought anything, and they could have, I mean, 10, 20, 30, they could have bought something even with just, you know, not necessarily turning in a set. What were they holding? I've gotten so out of the mindset for this. They were holding a bunch of stuff. Yeah, they may have had to break up a good set, but their chance of adding bronze is lower now without the trade cards. On the bonus side, we got Thrace and Crete entering into the 7s, so we might start to see some of the bigger numbers come out. There's still those gems floating around in somebody's hands that are totally useless still, because nobody can make 8 cities. Just largely because I've been incompetent across the game, I think. Alright. Alright, well, after trading, and it was kind of a painful trade session. Ooh, somebody got all the salt. But they did not make their layer. They tried. They don't need it quite yet, Thrace here, but now they're out of cards. That wasn't all the salt. They were one short, actually. They managed to pick up, agriculture and coinage, but they couldn't get another card. And most of the cheap ones are gone here. Only music was available, and they didn't have quite enough to get that along with the two other cheapest things, agriculture and coinage. Agriculture and literacy were the two that they were looking at. Instead, they bought coinage. Yeah, I had kind of a spill on this card at some point. Alright, let's see who else. Assyria made their limit, and they're going forward this turn. Let's look at what they have. 125, 235, 315, 435, 515. So they're only about halfway to their 1,000 points, but they only have 4 more cards. So at 515, let's take a quick look at with the calculator. 515 plus, well, they need law. All right, and we're getting there. Let's say democracy. That's 2 cards. They got 2 more cards, and they can easily make it in terms of that. Of course, they've got a lot of points to gather, but they've got a decent amount of time to gather it in. Babylon, I believe, had to take a pass. Oh no, they bought something. I think they bought, they had metalworking. I think they bought coinage and drama and poetry. Discounts on both, but not quite enough to get them over the limit. Maybe they only got one of those. I don't know. They didn't have a lot of cards. Poor Egypt only got cloth making. That's the last of the cheap ones, and they've got a really painful string of cheap cards here. It's going to be rough for them. They can make the 1,000, but they may not be able. Well, there aren't many cheap things left. The only one left is music. If they buy that, they may be in trouble. Crete, however, made it across as well, and they're going to be passing by. Let's take a look. Their points aren't as good. 110, 155, 295. That's a biggie. Engineering. 295, 355, 465, 470, 510, 620. So they're in better shape, actually, I think, than Syria is. 620 sounds pretty good. Other people, Africa, I think, picked up drama and poetry cheap, you know, hanging on to some decent trade cards. They weren't able to get the deal they wanted. They turned in a bunch of crap, really, that they ended up accumulating. There were some deals that just didn't happen. Anyway, that's about it that we have. Italy held on to their bronze. They couldn't move that. That was the biggie. The fact that Italy couldn't get a hold of more bronze, and some of the people, so like Egypt has a couple of them in their hand. Egypt has a nice hand for going into the next trading. They may be able to make their 3 cards. It's going to be tough, though. So there's a lot of the cards that are left are high point value. We've got a couple calamities to take care of here. We got the volcanic eruption, a flood, but the painful one's going to be this famine on Africa. Ooh, Africa's got a lot of cash. That's not good. They must not have been able to ditch it. Oh well. That's going to limit their expansion, I think. Alright, let's see. Okay, so semi-briefly, Africa's famine hit them pretty hard. They actually had to take manpower, which caused a city to fall apart because they couldn't take 10 points in cities. They have to take 9. They delivered 11 to Crete and 9 to Assyria, actually picking both players who have pottery. in their reservoir, but they had no grain. And these are what they saw as the two leaders. The other option would, of course, been Thrace, who has kind of a clean path and is at about the same level as Assyria. But I'm more worried about Assyria. Thrace has no trade cards left, and they're a card short from making the hump, so they may get stopped. It's hard to tell. There's no reason to believe Assyria will not get stopped. They're going ahead this time. There's reason to believe that Thrace may not. So Assyria took some hits, which kind of makes up for their gain over here. Crete definitely took hits. They got wiped out of their African area. It's their choice. Basically, they took only one city as a hit. They had enough manpower to survive that. They can still grow another city next turn, but their manpower in Asia Minor is kind of weak now. Of course, so is Assyria's. That's probably all good for Babylon, right? And these kind of aliens who are in the Middle East now, or Near East. It's time to move things forward. Nobody's out of cities, so we can all move forward here. Crete made their limit, staying in the lead. Assyria made their limit, but neither Babylon nor Egypt did. And so right now, Crete's really the bunny, and they're the ones we have to go hunting, right? All right. Looks like time for another turn.